If we can mute everyone who's not presenting, I'll give you some time for questions at the end, depending on how long this takes. But if you can mute your audio, I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So, yeah, I'm a licensed psychologist at Mankato Clinic. I've been here since 2014, and I consider myself to be primarily specializing in treating trauma, PTSD, different personality disorders, and just a lot of disorders that have trauma as a core feature. So I'll just give you a little background. So if you had come to me like a year and a half ago and said, which actually they did, and asked to have this presentation about a year and a half ago, I was not about it. A lot of times I think that presentations about compassion fatigue and burnout oftentimes tend to at least make me feel as though I'm kind of being blamed for my emotional reactions or for not doing a good enough job at separating my work life and home life, and where there's so much more systemically going on. So even before the pandemic started and the shutdown, I was already on kind of going in and out of burnout, compassion fatigue kind of stuff for about at least a year before that. We had a lot of people in a lot of need, which we still do. And one of the experiences I had, whether or not this was intentional, was we need to see more people, we need to see more new people. And unfortunately, this has the effect of having us get caseloads that are way too big, and we can't adequately help these people with the resources and the time that we have. So I'm guessing some of you may possibly relate to this in different ways. For classroom teachers, I'm sure you are probably always trying to do more with less. And I think this happens across a variety of professions. So some of the things that needed to happen for me to get out of that place, and I'm going to call that place a burnout because I wasn't in my experience was different from that secondary traumatic stress experience. So mine was mostly of burnout. And when what helped me get out of it was reducing the number of new people I had and having administrative support for doing so, and limiting my hours, changing my schedule, and having that actually go through and work. So there were a lot of systemic things that needed to happen in order for me to completely heal from some of that stuff. Although, as I'll talk about later, obviously this is an ongoing process for all of us. So I'm actually going to tell you why I don't think compassion fatigue is actually the right phrasing. So it might be more accurate to describe these phenomena as empathetic overwhelm or emotional exhaustion, secondary traumatic stress, burnout. So there are different experiences that encompass this term of compassion fatigue, but I'll be telling you a little bit more about why I don't feel that that's necessarily the right term. So first of all, I'd just like to invite everyone who is here and anyone watching this to just take a few moments to just check in and just notice what's going on with your body and with your mind. If it feels safe to do so, you may allow your eyes to close or soften your gaze, just so that you don't get distracted. And I just invite you to notice any thoughts or feelings or any body sensations you may be having. Notice any thoughts that may come as a result of experiences of invalidation or frustration, times when you have tried to get your needs met without success. And just notice any feelings of hopefulness, exhaustion, any areas of stress or anxiety, muscle tension, or any other reactions you may be having. And just allow those reactions to be. Just holding space for all your experiences, for all of these internal reactions or responses. Even if these responses might be numbness, tiredness, or something else. Giving permission. When that feels complete, just thank all of your thoughts, feelings, body sensations. Just thank them for being willing to be with you at this moment. And whenever it feels right, feel free to open your eyes, to re-enter the room, just taking your time. So I gave out I sent out a professional quality of life scale. And this scale has basically three different indices or subscales, whatever. So two of them are negative aspects that impact quality of life, and two of them are positive. So if you've already taken this and scored it, you can just keep that in mind as we're going through these slides to see which aspects are relevant to you at this moment. So the first aspect is burnout. And this is the aspect where I scored the highest when I was going through this phase of burnout. And this is characterized by having a lot of work, too much work, or responsibility without the resources to really do your work well. So there are some warning signs, oftentimes feeling obliged to say yes to things, even though you're already busy, feeling like you're spending your entire time in recovery mode or sleeping, feeling paralyzed or feeling unable to do things well enough, and feeling generally unhappy or getting sick a lot. Or perhaps spending way too many hours on a presentation all about burnout. Not that I know anything about that. So another cause of burnout is when expectations about a certain thing do not match with the reality of it. So I found this on Pinterest. Pinterest is amazing. And so how people really would think that they're going to spend their teaching careers, and with therapy it's similar, not the exact same, but how teachers really spend their time, oftentimes comparing teaching kids to be 75% of your time to 33%, maybe. That's a little bit of a difference. And so oftentimes feeling as though your reality is not the same as your expectations, especially for new teachers, that can be difficult. And of course, with the COVID pandemic, we've been rapidly and quickly trying to change the way we do things. And this is something that obviously through telehealth, I still have probably around 50%, maybe a little bit less than that, still as virtual visits. Whereas before the COVID pandemic, I had never done a telehealth session aside from other areas like the VA. So burnout. So burnout is one of the negative aspects. Another one is secondary traumatic stress. So as a trauma specialist, this is something I was relatively prepared to deal with, given that this was kind of what I decided to do my entire career on. But most people are not used to or prepared to hear about horrible things that people experience over and over and over again. And of course, so this is oftentimes what we think of as compassion fatigue. And this can be both primary trauma, that is things that you experience or things that happen to you directly, or secondary trauma, things that you hear about happening to someone else. So with the COVID pandemic, we've had basically a constant state of trauma, essentially, of anxiety and our bodies thinking we have to be in fight or flight mode all the time or shut down because fight or flight only lasts so long. And so we've all got some degree of that trauma ongoing. And particularly if you have other things that have happened to you in the past, that can also increase your sense of secondary traumatic stress. So when we're thinking about secondary trauma, it's important that we talk about the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. And this is where I'm going to define this, quote, compassion fatigue as somewhat differently than the people who coined the term. So, sympathy. We all know this. So you might send a sympathy card to someone. So I see that you're dealing with something difficult, and I feel sorry that you're going through it, but I don't feel it. It's not mine. I do not experience it. So, for example, I see that you have lost a dog, for instance. So you had to put down your dog. I see you. I see that you're going through something. I'm sad that you're going through it, but let's just say I haven't put down a dog, so I don't really know how that is. So I don't have a strong emotional reaction. And therefore, it may feel a little bit like pity, or it may feel a bit empty to the recipient. And this could prompt action. So, for example, I may donate money, I might write a sympathy card, I might express concern, but I really don't have a strong emotional reaction that's driving that concern. So then we have empathy. So empathy is where I feel your pain. And so, for example, with you put down your dog, oh yeah, I put down my dog too. I've been there. That was horrible. And I can feel your pain. And usually the person receiving empathy does experience it as genuine caring. I'm resonating with your pain. However, I can lose myself in this state of pain, and it can lead to empathetic overwhelm, which is kind of one of the terms that can be used instead of compassion fatigue. So in many cases with empathy, this may feel like an emotional roller coaster. So I'm resonating with your feeling, I'm feeling it. And a lot of times this may prompt action, but the action may not always be helpful. So I might feel like I need to fix someone. In my therapy, I might want to tell people, okay, here's what you do, here's the skills, go ahead. And that's all well and good, but I may be too tied to the outcome. And at least in therapy, and I'm guessing this is the case in teaching as well, sometimes people don't follow through. And sometimes you give them an assignment and it doesn't happen. So with empathy, oftentimes the outcome feels very important because I need you to be better so that I can feel better. So I feel your pain and I want to fix it. And the outcome is very important. So, compassion. So, compassion, I'm going to define as empathy plus wisdom. So, basically, I feel your pain and I also can separate enough from it so that I can be more effective and so that I don't take it on. So I feel your pain, and your pain does not become my pain. And the way I think of it in my profession is that I already know that you have what you need to heal. Sometimes you may need to learn some new skills, or for instance, learn, mathematics or something like that. So, but I know that you have within you all that you need in order to heal or to learn. I don't feel compelled to fix you or to rescue you. And I don't need to work harder than you are working. I don't need to feel like I have to do all this extra work when you're not pulling your weight. So, compassion, empathy plus wisdom, so I can feel your pain, but I'm not overwhelmed by it. So, I'm kind of a geek. Okay, I'm really a geek. And so my presentation would not be complete without a few brains. Um, I did my postdoc in neuroscience and doing fMRI on PTSD. So I have a thing for brains. And so I really liked this cartoon. When people say they listen to their heart, what they really mean is that their limbic system or their emotional centers of their brain is bossing their frontal lobes around. So these are some of the parts of the brain that are implicated or involved in experiences of pain, in this case, physical pain, and experiences that give us that sense of reward or reinforcement. So we've got these systems in the pain network, and specifically anterior insula. We've got the dorsal anterior cingulate, the thalamus, periaqueductal gray, and of course, if you're experiencing physical pain, you're going to have some activation in the somatosensory cortex, so basically the part of your brain that feels things from your body, physical sensations. So Tanya Singer is one of the most noted researchers on compassion and empathy. And so she looked at what parts of the brain are implicated in having empathy for someone else's pain. So I'm not feeling it, but I have empathy for it. I can experience it, I understand it, I feel it. And we have, this is just named a little differently. There are some areas of the brain that are have different names, but the anterior medial cingulate and the anterior insula. So these are pain circuits. So when I say I feel your pain, I literally feel your pain. Maybe not in my body, my somatosensory cortex is not necessarily activated, but I feel your pain. And then she looked at the network that's associated with compassion. And we'll talk a little bit about what she used to teach people compassion, but basically, these map pretty well onto this reward network. So compassion is not generally fatiguing because compassion has that distance. I care about you. I get how you feel. I've felt that too. And I'm not stuck in it. So with compassion fatigue slash empathetic overwhelm and with burnout, there are different systems and levels of intervention. So you've got the intervention at the self level. That is, I need to work on my internal system, myself. So this can involve different self-care activities. I've got a couple slides, and you'll be getting a copy of this presentation. So I've got a couple slides on different ways to engage in self-care, but most of us kind of instinctually know what that is. And then working on increasing compassion. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And then you've got the level at interpersonal. So this is between people. So this oftentimes has to do with setting boundaries and limits. So I'm not going to engage in the drama and the gossip of any workplace, because it gets me upset, for instance. And then again, keeping in mind compassion and empathy. So working on establishing and reinforcing your compassion system rather than getting stuck in empathy. And at the systems or leadership level, so this would be at the school level or the school district level, so anyone who is part of that leadership. So you want to balance the aspect of teachers and support persons, other professionals, having a sense of control that is proportional to their level of responsibility. So oftentimes when you have so much responsibility but very little control, that's a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for empathetic overwhelm and compassion fatigue, what we call compassion fatigue, and providing supports for individuals to help them do what they do best. So this can be teachers, providers, support staff, etc. And this is one area where I think the COVID-19 pandemic, for all that it was stressful, is stressful, and all of that, one of the things that I really appreciate about the clinic is that we all came together and really had supports to the extent that we were able to. And at the systems level or the leadership level, having trust in individual teachers and individual providers, support staff, etc., as is appropriate. So obviously, you have veteran teachers who have been doing this for a very long time and may have more experience in certain areas. And you have the brand new teachers or providers that may need a little bit more help or a little bit more support. And then we have broader systems. So at the community level, at the state level, the national level, and the global level. Didn't put that in. And really focusing as we broaden our view with our own compassion, being able to work on supporting communities that are most in need. For example, high-risk professions, essential workers, which I would say definitely includes teachers, and it's kind of been a neglected area in this pandemic perhaps until recently. And of course, people of color, LGBTQ plus individuals, people who are coming from rural or lower income communities, things like that. So on that scale, the final scale of the professional quality of life instrument is compassion satisfaction. And so this really has to do with the stuff that we went into this profession, this helping profession, to do. So I love my job. Even when I'm burned out, I love my job. And I love being able to take care of people. It's frustrating when I can't get to seeing them as often as they need to be seen, but I still love being there. So, so compassion, satisfaction, very important. So I do have some slides on self-care, and in particular, the Professional Quality of Life Scale. Their website has a pocket card that was developed for COVID, but still remains important. So it's on caring for yourself. You can kind of read over these at your leisure. And being able to focus your empathy. So trying to have a very conscious or even ritualized process of beginning and ending your day at your job. One of the things I do is I put away all of my paperwork and lock up my cabinets, and that is just kind of a natural way of closing what I have experienced that day and going home. So, a few ideas um, on how to deal with um, some of the burnout and compassion fatigue. So, I saw this and I really resonated with it, even though it's for teachers specifically. So, doing more of the work than those I serve, owning people's poor choices, getting into drama, feeling like I have to always be busy. And this one is one I definitely resonate with, and I'm still working on it. And holding myself to a standard of perfection, which, as you can see from the many hours I've spent on this presentation, I still haven't quite figured that one out yet. Um, so more examples of self-care. And really to focus on the things that are nourishing you rather than the things that drain you. Focusing on the things that are satisfying about your job. Of course, you need to do your whatever you find to be not as nourishing. Like for me, it's notes, maybe lesson plans or other documentation, but really focusing on those experiences that are really important to you. So, as we wrap up, I want to show you and help you to experience what we call mindfulness, or what we call metta, or loving kindness meditation. So, mindfulness meditation is another type of meditation. This is specific to developing more of that compassion and that loving kindness, and being able to extend that not only to ourselves, but also to other people. So, this is also the type of compassion training that Tanya Singer with the Brains, that she was teaching to her participants. So, once again, getting into a comfortable position. And we're first going to start with sending loving kindness to ourselves. So, getting into a comfortable position and taking a few breaths if that feels comfortable. Connecting with your core. And for this one, we're going to use a brief mantra. And you may choose to vary what you say to yourself, the specific mantras There are different versions online. You can find things that work for you, or you can make up your own. So this time we're going to say, may I be well, may I be safe, may I live with peace and joy. Just let's repeat that. Since you're all on mute, you can say this aloud if it feels safe to do so. So may I be well, may I be safe, may I live with peace and joy. May I be well, may I be safe, may I live with peace and joy. May I be well, may I be safe, may I live with peace and joy. So compassion often starts with yourself. Some of my clients have trouble starting with themselves because they don't feel particularly compassionate toward themselves. So when that's the case, you can instead start with a loved one and just change it up a little bit. May they be well, may they be safe, may they live with peace and joy. May they be well, may they be safe, may they live with peace and joy. And whichever way you choose to start, starting with those two tends to be the most helpful. Once you feel comfortable and you start feeling a really deep internal sense of compassion toward yourself and toward a loved one, then you can move on to an acquaintance or someone you don't know very well, that you don't have particularly negative feelings toward. And then you can move on to someone who's hurt you or someone whom you dislike. And finally, moving on to wishing loving kindness to all beings, human and non-human. Sorry about that. So at this point, I'd like to open things up to any questions or comments. I also have the professional quality of life and the scales in the slides. So if you would like to look at them later, that would be great. So please feel free to either unmute your microphones or feel free to text in the comments or the chat box or whatever, and Marie can read those out.
We did get one comment. Everybody can hear me, right? We did get one comment from Randy Palmer, who shared the athletic trainer's lament. It says, "We the willing, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We have done so much with so little for so long that we are now qualified to do anything with nothing." So
Yeah, it sometimes feels like we've got to make miracles happen, huh? And if anyone wants to share how your experience of that scale was, feel free to do so. You don't have to, but
Well, Misha, I will say one of the things that resonated with me when I was watching this and listening to you was just trying to understand the difference between what is compassion, what is empathy, and just sort of our reactions to the people around us and the problems that are presented to us daily, minutely, if you're a teacher with students in a classroom.
Yeah, and it definitely, oftentimes you will find that you're moving into and out of those different experiences, and sometimes even not even resonating with your students. You may feel very frustrated by them, or you may be overtaken by annoyance or whatever. And so, yeah, definitely, it's an ongoing process. Yeah. Is there anything else from the chat? Or are there any things that have been brought up in the questions or anything like that?
Yeah. That was all I saw in the chat.
Okay. I thought I had seen some things come across briefly across my screen. So,
Okay. Do you have any reading recommendations on the brain and how to increase compassion? This is from Kelly.
I don't, I know I heard about a book yesterday and I don't have it off the top of my head. Um, One of the things that I've been delving into a little bit is internal family systems therapy, and that's kind of a model that has been helpful in terms of helping me to find my own compassion. Um, but I know that there are books on compassion that I will definitely send out with the updated handouts. Um, so
And
thanks for that.
and Marcy Koch also mentioned that she liked the explanation of the difference between empathy and compassion, and she also appreciated the closing of the office to separate so you don't take your work life home.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And then there was one more, well, a couple more. Also, Marcy mentioned that she tries to focus on the gratitude people feel toward me and others, and she doesn't think about those I serve being ungrateful, but that would drag me down in a hurry. And I don't honestly believe that's true, even when people may not agree.
Yeah, yeah. There may be a some aspect of frustration or anger or um, maybe argumentativeness that sometimes happens, and definitely I can relate to that. Um, and also, I would agree that even when people seem to be ungrateful, I think sometimes that's a misunderstanding, or that may be a protective strategy that they're employing um, to just help themselves stay together.
Right. And Randy Palmer also responded that one thing for meant for helping for helping professions to save every note that and store them so that you can come back to them later as a pick me up, like, oh, this person really appreciated me. So when if you're feeling defeated about another reason.
Yeah, so if you get those either drawings or thank you notes, things like that, definitely that's a great idea.
Mhm. And then Heather Hadeen, who started started the ball rolling, said is wondering systemically if we can't make changes, like we can't increase resources right now, we're staffing. What is the best thing we can do to help heal ourselves? Obviously self-care, but what else? We also can't decrease our hours.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's definitely, I think that I talked about the systemic changes that were helpful in changing workload and things like that, but that's not always possible. And um, there are still days like yesterday where I found myself here and at 8:30 at night, and um, in this case, I was preparing this presentation, um, but I oftentimes do still find myself um, doing a lot of work on off hours, and it's definitely that's kind of a reality for many of us. And so I think especially having a kind of a transition, which I think at least for teachers it seems like that was a difficult part of doing the remote learning or the virtual learning, um, because you didn't really have a transition between work and home. And so having that ability to do work and leave it at work, and it's it's really a symbolic thing in some ways too. Um, and I think also remembering to check in with yourself repeatedly over the course of a day and just, okay, I'm going to take the time to really center and be with myself, even if it's when I have to run to the bathroom or whatever. I know that things can kind of get crazy. I shouldn't have used that word. Things can kind of get busy. And so definitely just taking the time to really take care of yourself, taking the time to have those little moments of restoration and those moments to just take a break and be mindful.
And then Heather also mentioned one more thing when you were in response to what you were saying, that she has noticed that as well, that you'll have a really good day and then the next day everything tanks. And so you're sort of on this emotional roller coaster, which is exhausting. Do
Mm-hmm.
you have any advice for some of those ups and downs, like how to deal with that? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think remembering that um, you don't have to get stuck in the fray, right? So remembering that if you can get the distance, if you can get the emotional clarity, that yes, this can all be tanking, everything can be chaotic, and everything, can be wild throughout the day. And also, if I can get a little bit of clarity in my head, then I can hold on to that space for the chaos even while it's still going. I can give space for things both inside of me, for things to be chaotic, and also things outside of me to be chaotic, but I don't have to get stuck in it. And that's really a practice. It can be helped by zooming out. So when you're looking at maybe visualizing this chaos, trying to zoom out of that and see the broader picture. Remember that even though this day is very hectic and chaotic and I'm go, 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 there are other days and I don't need to stay stuck in it.
Super helpful. Oh, so Randy also reminded people not to underestimate the ability of laughter and a sense of humor as a stress reliever.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I did to cope with the pandemic, and this is also me geeking out a little bit, um, I love to make fun of myself, just like lighthearted, because I'm like that. Um, and so I actually developed a video that I stuck up on YouTube about how the COVID-19 vaccine works because I have enough medical knowledge and enough understanding of how to communicate with people to explain that in a way that people can understand. And so I bought a bunch of these giant microbes. Let me just quickly go get it. So geeking out on my little COVID microbe and my COVID vaccine. Um, so I love doing these things that are kind of spontaneous. And even though I don't see kids, it's awesome to have these little like stuffed COVID little things in my office. And it's just, it brings out the joy in me. So definitely laughter, joy, those are really helpful and healing. Thank you.
Well, I think it's 5-1, so that's probably a great place to finish. I don't know, Heather, if you're available and want to say anything, but I can say that we did record this, and I'll share this with Heather and a link with Heather so it can be available to your colleagues at the school district and whoever you might think could benefit from this. And Heather is on wireless earphones right now, so she's not able to chat, but she thanks everybody for joining us today, and we hope that this was really helpful for all of you, and thank you all for teaching our kids,
And I
our
will,
collective kids.
and if you have any questions, definitely feel free to I would say contact Marie with any questions. And I will also distribute the slides probably later this afternoon or evening to Marie.
Okay,
All right. Thank you.
have a good weekend.
All right.